welcome, Ellie. It's so nice to be speaking with you. Can you start off by telling me just a little bit about your background and how you came to be in the world of data protection?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ellie Dowsett. I've currently been in the role I am now as DPO for the last almost 6 years for Best Companies. Prior to that, I did almost 10 years in IT managed services, a few years in finance, and prior to that, retail. I think it's quite interesting, really, how my sort of data protection story evolved. If I think back to when I sort of first came across any sort of data protection training, it was back in 2000 when I was working in Asda. And I had my first sort of training within the personnel departments, and it was just a 10-minute session of basically anything that you hear or see or read or anything that goes on in this office. You don't repeat it, you don't talk about it, you know, it never leaves the room. And that was sort of the opening of, right, oh, okay then. It's really nice because in 2002, Asda became top of the best companies to work for lists, beating companies like Microsoft, Cisco. I remember it very clearly. There was so much celebrating at the time. It was great. So to find nearly 20 years on, or however long it is, that I am then working for that organization in Best Companies that looks to recognize great workplaces and good company culture. It's a really nice wraparound doing that data protection element. So that's how I first came into sort of touching onto data protection. But I think with GDPR coming in, these new roles of data protection officers, I think that the role I was in, I enjoyed, and I've been doing it a long time, but I felt I needed to stretch. And I enjoyed doing all the sort of policy creation. We supported a lot of organizations with ISO. So it just felt like the natural next step to me when I saw that a company local to me was looking for something to fill that gap. I just leapt on it, really, and I'm very grateful to Best Companies for seeing my passion and want to do something that hadn't really existed before, but I had that motivation to go and do it, really, and I've not looked back since. So yeah.
I was going to say, what are your sort of motivators and drivers?
I actually support a sort of a community group within Cyber Wales, the data protection and ethics cluster. One of the things that I found during COVID, as often people talk about, you feel like the only DPO in the village at times, that the lone wolf, that there's nobody to talk to. And Wilson was the odd conference you could go to pre-COVID. It wasn't that much of a big thing, and the ICO's guidance was sort of coming slowly, and really felt that I missed that connection with people. So I started to get online to LinkedIn to find my online community. And for anybody else who struggles or feels like they're on their own, that should be your starting point of trying to find people who specialize in different areas of data protection, because you can never know it all. So I started getting in touch with people, and some of those have become really, really good friends. And then when COVID sort of relaxed, we wanted to meet these people that you had suddenly met online and had the odd conversation with. I went to a conference in Manchester, and from that, I felt inspired, really, to do something more locally to support, the sort of other DPOs that must be in across North Wales and within the Northwest that I just didn't know. And the conversations that I have online with people, I felt I've gained so much support from that community. It's a really great way to give back as well. So that's I basically, that became my driver to create something locally, and we did the first one last year in October. It went really well. I had a lot of support from my CEO, who's like, just use our offices, you know, if it works, it works. You always have that fear factor of, what if nobody comes? You know, trying to find really engaging speakers that will sort of drop the jargon. One of the main things that I really wanted to do was sort of bridge the gap between sort of traditional IT and data protection, because there's so many people doing such good work from the legislation in terms of the documentation, but they don't have the technical knowledge. And so trying to find people that can try and balance those two areas and bring people together without sort of overcomplicating it. That's sort of where I try to go with it. So yeah, it worked really well. I did the next one in March earlier this year at a different venue. Another local organisation offered to host it, and Moneypenny. It's all voluntary, and it's all, the speakers give their time freely to get involved. They're in the same position. They're kind of like, well, we're just happy to give back and give that voice and sort of give representation to those sorts of areas that need to be spoken about. And yeah, people come, you know, so it's they say, don't they, if you build it, people will come. So that's basically what happened.
So it's incredible. So you're creating this sort of community for sort of DPOs. You created some great resources, which you kindly shared with us as well, which we really appreciate. But why do you think that there is a sort of lack of support out there for DPOs?
Yeah, I often think that potentially it's down to a specific recital, actually. Recital 97, where basically it goes on the fact that employees should be acting in an independent manner. And I think sort of since sort of 2018, when that came in, it was a case of a massive emphasis on DPOs being independent, either in the organisation or external to the organisation, and just being seen to do data protection, not getting involved with the day-to-day stuff, and they effectively became siloed, I think, in a lot of the aspects. And if you look at the actual articles in terms of the GDPR, there is more emphasis on raising awareness and training than there ever is on independence. But it's independence that we always seem to be drawn to. And whilst awareness is the sort of minimum standard, actually, it's behavioural change you want. And security and GDPR are so interwoven now that you do need to actually do more than just raising awareness. You need cultural change, you need behavioural change, and for it to be long term to make a difference and make an impact. Go on, sorry.
Well, I mean, that leads me really nicely onto Project Bijou, which is about changing culture through storytelling and shared experiences. And you've long championed the importance of having a good culture of data protection in organisations. Why do you think it's so important for you to embed good data protection cultures in the workplace? And how do you go about inspiring people to think differently?
Yeah, well, I think, as Emma always talks about the why, I think I'll start with the why aspects. So in terms of data protection culture, every organization will have some sort of culture, whether it's a positive one, where it's one that's largely ignored or not that great. But equally, every other department across the organization will have its own subculture, and it will every department will be fighting for attention, either whether it's for resource or whether it is for budget, or just to raise profile with individuals within those specific sub-departments. So I think it's really important to actually raise the awareness of data protection in terms of what we're doing. And actually, for majority of organizations that are selling products and services, trust from the people buying those services and products is one of the most important elements alongside the products and services themselves. So I think potentially a lot of DPOs need to recognize the value they can actually contribute and almost be their own cheerleaders for a certain side of it. There's a lot of imposter syndrome, I think, in the sector generally. People do know their stuff, but they almost feel that in a way, by championing what they're doing and giving their knowledge and providing advice, that they're somehow being humble in some way. And I think to quote C.S. Lewis, I know Emma loves her quotes, but you know, I think C.S. Lewis nails it really in the fact that it's a case of being humble isn't thinking less of yourself. It's talking less about yourself. So I think it's just a case of people we have some amazing people in our sector who really know their stuff. And it always surprises me when you hear them talk about well, it's imposter syndrome, either put themselves down or not being like they want to overly contribute or have or challenge current ways of thinking. So just to go back to the original question, I think to bring that why it's so important. The trust element, definitely organizations need to feel that they can be trusted in what they're doing with data. So there is an element there. You are safeguarding the organization. You are being responsible with the data for the individuals that work there. Certainly the recording that I supplied to you, you know, in terms of employee engagement surveys, you know, it's such a really easy way if you want to start trying to contribute and raise your profile within an organization, because it touches every single person within the organization. And if you can explain, if somebody comes to you and say, what's that like? Are my responses protected? Are they anonymous? If you were to turn around and go, I don't know anything about it, I just got the invite yesterday, you know, that's an immediate off put, and that, you know, it immediately stops anybody from wanting to do that. If you don't know anything about it, why would they trust it to get involved? But if you talk about, you know, it's another aspect, opportunity to talk about what it is that you actually do for the organization, and talk about the time spent on the due diligence, the work on the contracts, the level of protection. You know, you might lose them at some point in your enthusiasm, but but they will go away and go, oh yeah, actually I trust this process. And it's the same for any other aspect that you are doing across the organization. And spearheading those sorts of initiatives, because you know, there's every department will want software at some point. By sending it to you, it reaffirms that it is doing the right thing. They start to see you less as a blocker and actually more of a case of you're safeguarding the organization. And that's, you know, being a team player, as I was talking about before, doesn't mean to say that you lose your independence, because they are two different things. And I think, again, that's something that people tend to get a little bit lost with. It just means that you're trusted with your opinion. You know, if something needs to either be restricted or relooked at or an alternative, you can give that advice and guidance to say, this isn't right. We need to go back to them. We need to change the contracts. We need to look at doing things differently or reduce the amount of fields. And then it's also impacting their priorities, and they can see that actually you are working alongside them in order to achieve the same purpose.
And like you said, it's about helping the company sort of, you know, prioritize, because data protection is huge. And I think sometimes just the sheer size and scale of the issue, people sort of just put blinkers on.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming. And certainly when you look at it, you know, in the full context of the variances between finance, health, technology, so, and all the different backgrounds that people come from, whether it's from a legal background, whether it's from a technical background, or whether they haven't come from any sort of data protection or element, you know, whether they were a baker or something like that before. The really nice thing about data protection is if you've got a passion for it, and you're engaged with what you are actually trying to do, anybody can really sort of transition into it. You just have to have that want to do it, I suppose, to that end.